We won't wait. We won't run. We'll conjure up the courage we need to create solutions for our homeland.
Our
Africa. With our courage, we will innovate for our time.
We will raise up a new generation of independent actors who, with us, will build a new tomorrow.
We won't wait. We won't run.
We'll do it ourselves. We are #DIY Africa.
Welcome to #DIY Africa, presented by the Civic Tech Innovation Forum and Jamfest.
Good afternoon, good morning, good afternoon, good day, wherever you are in the world. Welcome to Jamfest. And if you're joining us for the first time, do not forget the hashtags. It's #Jamfest and #Jamfest 2021, and as well as a #DIY Africa. My name is Bonto Pilani, and I will be facilitating this incredible conversation. I've been looking forward to this conversation for a while now. It's always really great to hear about what is happening in terms of the media space and how media organizations are really trying to find alternative revenue streams during this time. And we have an incredible panel of people, as news media struggles and as it shifts from print to digital, we've seen various models and revenue models really tumble, particularly through as digital media rises, but also because of the COVID-19 pandemic. But we have some of the change makers and leaders within the subscription and membership models in Africa for news media who are going to share some tips, and maybe you're sitting there and wondering how they do it. Well, today you will find out. Don't forget also to download the Hover app, where you can interact and join us as we're having the virtual conversations. COVID-19 has really changed how we can have conferences. It's always so nice during breaks to convene at the coffee and snack bars, but we don't have that. But the Hover app makes it possible for us to have that. So please make sure to really get the app and interact with everyone, including the panelists that will be speaking to us shortly. As I said, I'm Bonto Pilane, and I will be just facilitating this incredible conversation. I already have my pen and paper to take notes from our notable speakers, who are Wale Lawal from The Republic and Yvette Demiri from Stairs Business, Musangom from La Maison de Reporter, and Gwebas Lawrence and Ivor Price from Food from Zanzi. And they all have incredible things to share with us. And we're going to have different presentations that will take about 10 minutes each that they will share, and they will also tell us what is working for them, what they have learned, what are some of the lessons they have learned, some of the advantages from developing either subscription or business models. But before we kick off, as I said, that we have this incredible panel of experts and change makers on our continent, and I just want to read their bios quite shortly before we begin our presentations. And Yvette Demiri, who's a product manager at Steers Business in Nigeria. She has spent her career delivering revenue for media organizations by solving reader problems. And at Steers Business, Yvette launched the flagship subscription model and product, and currently works there as the production manager. We also have Wale Lawal, who is the founder of The Republic, which is based in Nigeria, pardon me. And he's also the editor-in-chief of The Republic, which is a new publication for Nigerians that is, and everyone who is what he calls Afro-curious. I love that so much. He used to work, he's a former KPMG management consultant and a very experienced media professional, as well as a graduate of the University of Oxford. So Wale will also be giving us some insights there. Musangom, who's the managing editor of La Maison de Reporters. I'm practicing my French today. He's based in Senegal and he's the founder, and he's been a freelance journalist from school and has worked in editorial freedom, as well as before he established La Maison de Reporters, and he's also worked in national and international media across the world. We also have Ivor Price, who's the co-founder and editor-in-chief of Food of Mzansi, which is based here in South Africa, as the name alludes, and he has 21 years of experience. He's a multi-award-winning journalist and has worked in both print, broadcasting, and digital media. And at Food for Mzansi, which is the leading digital agricultural news and lifestyle publication here in South Africa, and his colleague and also co-founder Kobus Lawrence, who is also, as I said, the co-founder of Food for Mzansi, and he is strategy director as well for Yeah Baby, a digital marketing agency. He's also an award-winning environmental journalist and has worked across South Africa and East Africa. So we are in the right hands today, this morning, because as you can hear from just the brief bios that I've read, that we have really, really advanced and experienced experts who are going to be telling us really about everything that we need to know. And as I said, Jamfest is co-hosted along with Civic Tech Innovation Forum. We thank every single one of you for joining us from across the continent and the rest of the world under hashtag DY Africa theme. And please do not forget to tweet us at Jamfest Africa 2020, as well as using the hashtag DY Africa. We're going to have the presentations. Please, as the presentations are happening, you can put the questions that you have in the chat. After all the presentations are done, we're also going to have a little bit of a conversation between all the speakers. So some of your questions might be answered there, but in between, I will be going into the Q&A and chat sections to highlight questions for our distinguished guests and speakers. So please feel free to add that. And if you are logging in via Zoom, please go down to the bottom of your screen on the right and select English or French if you do need French translations there at the bottom. And without further ado, with that long intro that I have just put us all through, just like to kick off and give it over to Kobus and Ivor to kick off our presentations as they tell us about how they make subscription and membership models work for them. Ivor, Kobus, over to you.
Good morning, Poncho. Good morning, everybody. We are so honored to share a little bit about Food for Mzansi with you this morning. Mzansi, of course, is a colloquial name for South Africa. We are an agricultural vertical, almost 3 years old. We're turning 3 in November, but the last 3 years have been quite amazing for us. And we thought there's no better way of introducing our brand than to introduce our colleagues and audience to you. So we'd like to kick off with a video.
Food for Mzansi proudly salutes the unsung heroes of agriculture in South Africa. Initially, its co-founders, Ivor Price and Kobus Lawrence, embarked on a 3-month project to tell some of the stories so often overlooked by the mainstream media and broader society. Little did they know that they were giving birth to Africa's best digital news startup.
It's special to us. It means something to us. It means something to the readers we represent. Kind of feels strange calling them readers anyway. It feels like family.
Food for Mzansi believes in the power of agriculture to unite the nation, to heal, to move South Africa forward.
Apologies about that. We're just fixing the gremlins in our
Clever.
system. There we go.
Now reaching more than 1 million people per month, Food for Mzansi has not only become a leading agricultural news and lifestyle publication, but also a trendsetter, an omni-channel brand that has already won 7 African Digital Media Awards and 2 nominations in the 2021 Global Media Awards.
Food for Mzansi's editorial team unashamedly shares success stories and good news from the farms and agribusinesses who feed South Africa. That being said, they don't hesitate to speak truth to power.
When a Western Cape farmer reached out to Food for Mzansi to tell his story about how he had been wronged by government for nearly 10 years, when I first got that call, it kind of shook me to my core. I also cried with him when he was relaying his emotions, and as a member of the Food from Mzansi team, to actually have played a hand, it makes me emotional. Sorry. To have played a hand in helping him get justice is a big honor for me.
They've never been featured on any kind of magazine. They've never been featured on any type of publication. So when you connect with these people and they tell your stories and it eventually gets published on Food from Mzansi, when these people come back to you and they say, you know, because of that article, they were able to connect with more farmers, they were able to infiltrate more markets. I think for me, that's one of the most rewarding feelings. At the heart of Food for Mzansi's nationwide success is Farmers Inside Track, an exclusive newsletter and podcast to empower the very up-and-coming farmers and agripreneurs that the brand champions.
There's this group of farmers that weren't really sure where they were placed. They weren't big enough to be fully commercial, but they weren't small-scale farmers. They weren't just starting. So we sort of dubbed them the Middletons. These farmers were hungry for information that they weren't necessarily getting from other agri-publications. So it's the how-to element. They maybe have some funding, they just got land and they want to know how to get started. So anything from starting a budget, finding out 10 steps to start a chicken farm. So it's the basics, but it's also enough for them to get going and get to sprinting speed. And I think that's what's important. And it's not limited to one commodity. It's not limited to one grouping. It's not limited to one province. We offer them everything that they need to be able to do what they do best, and that's to grow food for South Africa. Food.
Thank you. So we love sharing the passion of our team, and hopefully you can feel the emotion. We've got 4 different audiences at Food for Mzansi. Initially, we started only with one, the one second on your screen, the farmer, female farmer, she's called Mbali. And it's since developed into 4 different audience avatars. These audiences have really adopted to keep models and our business models around each of these avatars. It was important for Food for Mzansi to physically draw them. So any member of our team, if you should wake them up at 3 a.m. in the morning, they will tell you that the one on the left is Nomsa. She's a city woman, she's in her 30s. She's got no connection to agriculture, but she listens to the radio stations and she's clued up on the latest debates on land reform. And the children are now entering agriculture. Mbali, the second one, is a Black female farmer. She's what we believe the new face of South African agriculture. In fact, all our research and evidence points to the fact that the future female farmer in our country will be a Black female, which is a dramatic shift from the white males that many people have believed for longer than a century is our audience. We're finding that the last 2 avatars, we call them Tiens and Malani, the young version in our brand and our home, and they want to work unlike some of the previous generations, across different sectors, and they're very keen on building partnerships.
Yes, so basically we started our niche offering, the Farmers Inside Track that was a bit mentioned in the video, as a way to help us target only one of these audiences. As Ivor said, we've got quite a broad audience out there. So one of the strategies we took to try and ensure that the relevant content reaches the relevant niche of the audience was starting the Farmers Inside Track offering. As Dawn said in the video, it presents how-to content and industry opportunities. And initially, we started it as a members-only website, which is quite took off from the Food from Zanzi site, and we needed, we realized we need that traffic. But at the moment, it is mainly built around the weekly newsletter and podcast, which you also saw in the video. So we abandoned this members-only site, and we decided to rather actively grow this newsletter offering and the databases around it. So the newsletter offering we actually built up. We started with Farmers Inside Track as a weekly newsletter with this weekly podcast. In the 2 years since we started it, we've actually now built it out to where we've got 2 Farmers Inside Track newsletters a week, one on a Saturday, one on a Wednesday, slightly different content mixes. And each of them has their own podcast that goes out on the same day. We've also, to cater for the rest of our audiences, we've now got also the Mzansi Today newsletter, which goes out to a daily. That contains general agriculture news. We've got stories of change once every week. And it contains to ensure that gets to the Nomsa audience. And then we've got Mzansi Flavor every Monday, which is a compendium of our food and lifestyle content. Okay, we've grown from 0 in the past 18 months. We've now got a database of more than 27,000. We've been growing at 7% per month, this total database audience, and FIT, which is still, that's Farmers Inside Track, which is still the cornerstone of the strategy, is the biggest, and it's now got 14,000 farmers subscribed to it. So the value of this, we'll share in the next slide, but you'll have to remember, so these are 14,000 people who signed up to receive information for us. We've got the email addresses, we've got some more info on some of them. So it enables us to target them with content specifically relevant for them. And actually this inactive members only site of ours that we abandoned more than a year ago is still actually growing. It's grew by almost 40% organically over the past 6 months. Because there's valuable content there behind the membership wall. What we do to grow this audience is we run house ads on our website on Food from Zanzi. We've got campaigns going on social media. We run competitions to get people to sign up. Our most successful actually tactic that we've used is we created this lead generator, a long article in the form of a downloadable PDF. It was on chicken farming. We created, I think that was in April, and it has steadily been getting us subscribers ever since. I think we're on 7,000 people who signed up to that chicken farming newsletter database now. So that was quite a a successful tactic. I'm just going to give over to Ivor quickly to elaborate on. We see three benefits from this membership strategy: monetization, segmentation, and audience engagement. I was just going to quickly talk through monetization.
Yeah, that is our last slide as well. So just in terms of monetization, remember that Food from Mzansi has got 4 different audiences. They're also bring up a more detailed analysis, so to understand all of their habits and their interests. And that enables us to sell to a targeted audience, our targeted audience to our clients. It also helps us to bundle our channels in very attractive offerings. For example, the likes of Standard Bank. If Standard Bank wants X, we can target it to a very, very specific audience, and often with great results. The website is quite a broad audience. So if you go into foodfromzansi.co.za, you'll notice that there's quite a broad audience and content offering. But the databases then help us to ensure that the right content reaches the right people. So it's very broad on the website, but increasingly people are finding news on social media and as well as the newsletter offerings in our podcast, and that is via the segmentation strategy. Of course, our audience engagement one is very effective in building traffic and return traffic. A lot of our content turns out to be evergreen, and often we are surprised to wake up on a sudden day and see a certain story trending when it wasn't the latest story. And it helps to make us less dependent on Google Discover. Google is owning the space, which is in a great position to be in as a publisher. So we're trying to do all sorts of innovative stuff around that. Finally, in closing, Kobus?
Yeah, just to give you an idea of where we're heading with this, we're still actively building the newsletter and podcast audiences for all the reasons that Ivor set out now. It helps us have little audiences within our audience that's very monetizable. We are building out our Farmers Inside Track offering into an actual educational channel. To kind of take the content and actually bring it, level it up into an actual educational offering. We are bringing the member gate onto our Food from Mzansi website and bringing all of that content from the abandoned Farmers Inside Track site onto Farmers Inside Track. And then there's in the future, we don't know when, we're looking at turning that member gate maybe partially into a pay gate so people can actually start paying for access to this evergreen content of ours. Thank you very much for the opportunity. We'll be around for the discussion later. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Kobus and Ivor. Those are the co-founders of South Africa's Food from Mzansi, and very interesting insights on how they have leveraged their very niche audience and even some of the challenges that they've faced. And I already see a question from Nokuzola there that we'll get to a little bit later. And with that said, I'd like to welcome Wale Lawal. As I said, Wale is the founder and editor-in-chief of The Republic, which is based in Nigeria. Wale, please take over. We're looking forward to your presentation.
Yes, I will just share my screen now.
All right.
This one. Sorry, are you able to see my, able to see my, is it in presentation mode?
Yes, it is in presentation mode. We can see your screen well.
Okay, perfect. Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining this session. Like Poncho said, my name is Wale Lawal. I'm the founder and editor-in-chief of The Republic, and I'll be taking you through what it is that we do at The Republic, our subscription model, what's working, where we're seeing some opportunities, what we're learning, and also just more generally, the lessons that we've learned about monetizing our publication over the years. Let's see. So The Republic is a subscription media company for the Africa curious. We are based in Lagos, Nigeria. And what we basically do is provide in-depth coverage of the underreported stories and issues affecting Nigerians and Africans at large. Really what guides the way that we work is the idea that as the world becomes more digitally inclined, and as we all begin to get more of our news online, the internet isn't necessarily making information on Africa accessible. If anything, there's a lot more noise these days and a lot more complexity. And so much is happening on the continent and so quickly that it's becoming a bit more difficult or a bit more challenging to keep up with what's happening. And so what we do is really provide the context that allows people to understand what's going on. It's this idea that we're getting the news faster than ever, and we also should be getting the context that we need to understand what's going on, particularly when it concerns Africa. And so we publish online daily, and then we also publish in print on a quarterly basis as well. And this is our team. Our team is mostly editors. And the guiding philosophy of this is, it's the idea that what we really do as editors is provide context. So it's this idea that we have a lot of talented writers, and like every modern newsroom these days, we are heavily reliant on freelancers. We work with a network of thousands of freelancers spread across the continent. And essentially what we do is provide these freelancers the editorial support and resources that they need to produce world-class journalism. There's also something that I'll speak to later on in my presentation, which is this idea that as newsrooms become more digital and as they rely a lot more on freelancers, there's a lot of demand for local African voices. But of course, we also have a lot of challenges with getting those digital skills. And so for any subscription business or for any subscription media business that's thinking about creating value, that's one challenge that doesn't often get spoken about enough, which is the skills challenge that's going to kind of get in the way of you producing really high quality content. And so in terms of our vision, what we really are building is really a network of media products that make keeping up with what's going on in Africa the easiest thing that that you can do on the internet. And so what we're really doing is really starting to think about ways in which we can change the ways that Africa is represented. And the major way that we do that is by centering the voices of those who know Africa the best, Africans themselves. And so it's this idea of really building this community of freelance contributors, obviously starting with a lot of work that's based on text and then evolving into other media platforms and into other media, segments as we grow. And our revenue model, we generate revenue mainly through subscriptions, but then it's also still quite diverse. And that's quite, to some extent, that's influenced by the environment that we're in, which I will speak to when I speak, when I move into the next slide, which takes you through, the origins of our subscription model. And so the way in which we generate revenue is actually based, it's in some way part of the story itself, which is that we started by trying out different opportunities. And so subscriptions just happened to be the one that kind of really took off and then dominated everything else. But we also generate revenue through sales of our print magazines by also collaborating with third-party groups and through professional services, editorial services that we offer to third-party organizations, to corporates, and to institutions as well. And so I'll speak to that as well over the course of this discussion, why having such a diverse mix of revenue lines was very important for us as a startup, and also as a startup that was being founded by a sole founder as well, and really having to think about ways, to hustle the system essentially. And so the Republic started in 2017. We started just by publishing a free website, let's put it that way. And we weren't even registered as a business at that time, but what we just had was a website that we were using, or that I was mainly using, to really look at what people were interested in learning about what was going on, across Africa. And what then happened was between that time and 2018, the larger context here and why we've kind of represented it this way is that there are actually 4 different phases that we've gone through. And so I kind of jumped the gun by starting, with the context on 2017. But really 2017 was really just trying to understand the landscape and really just trying to get a sense of what people were interested in. At this time, I was kind of in between graduate programs. I'd been focusing a lot on Africa and really trying to understand what was going on the continent. And I was really struggling with, piecing together what was going on, because the sources that I was having, or the sources that I had access to, were very disparate. So I was, reading textbooks, I was reading, foreign press, local press, social media, all of that, and doing all of the, triangulation that you need to do to really understand what was going on. And so at some point, it then occurred to me that, look, why can't you get something that will have the rigor of textbooks, that would also have the authority of foreign press, that would have the local relevance of local press, but then would also have the engagement levels of local, of social media, of blogs, but obviously without the noise, without the misinformation, without the lack of quality that local press can sometimes have, and also just without the lack of context that foreign press has sometimes, and also without the lack of speed that textbooks and academic material tends to have sometimes. And so between 2017 and 2018, what then happened was really trying out this model. And what I found was it was very difficult to scale it because we were struggling to get advertising. I mean, it was really quality writing. We were getting a lot of really interesting people writing, but we had a chicken and egg problem, which is that we would reach out to advertisers and they would say, well, you're too small to advertise in. But then we would say, well, we're small because you're not giving us money to grow. And so we kept, being trapped in this cycle of not being able to kind of just scale. And obviously we were also in a space that was dominated by media outlets that were using or that were heavily reliant on advertising. And what I had also known by being someone who was reading all these media outlets was I was also finding that a lot of media outlets that depended on advertising tended to have issues with accountability to their readers. They always tended to seem more accountable to advertisers, to corporates, to governments. And so the question then now became, how do you break away from this chicken and egg cycle? And how do you also avoid not seeming accountable to your readers? Because we were a small platform, we were already close to the people that were reading our work. And so just through a couple of conversations from feedback, the question then just became, why don't you get people to pay for it? Like if they really enjoy it this much, if they really see value in it this much, why don't you ask them to pay for it? And so in 2019, we kind of just went with this experimental annual and yearly subscription, which took off. And I think the main thing that that was important with launching a digital subscription was one, identifying who we were targeting with those subscriptions, but also having something that they had that they considered valuable. And that for us was really the editorial quality and the editorial work that we were bringing into the publishing space. Because like I mentioned, this is a team in which there's no writers, we're all purely editors, and we're all really thinking about ways in which we can work with diverse authors in really elevating the quality of their work. And so people were really appreciating the fact that you could read something on Ghana, you could read something on South Africa, all from a Nigerian publication that had a really rich quality. And then, they were willing to pay for that. And then a couple of things that we kind of learned along the lines was just how social media was relevant to that, how social media was such a huge force and a huge funnel for us as well. And what we kept doing in that period was then just growing our social media base and being as heavily present as possible as we could on primarily Twitter and Instagram. We found over time that it was much easier to grow a community on Instagram than it was on Twitter. But then the same logic applied, that these were people that were discovering the work through social media and would then subscribe as well. And so one area that we've kind of been looking at tapping into is also looking at how we can scale subscriptions beyond social media, which is something that I will speak to towards the end when I discuss what we're thinking about in terms of next steps. But by May 2021, we had actually reached a new phase in what I'd say kind of the ways in which we were thinking about subscriptions. Now we were trying to think about it in a more specific manner. We had gotten to know who our audience was. We had gotten to realize who our subscribers were, and we started to kind of map out blocks of different groups that we were serving. And one of those groups was students. Like I mentioned, I started this thing when I was a student. And so it kind of resonated with students throughout. And so we started asking ourselves, how can we produce a product that would really serve the need for students? And we have been working on this for about 2 years. The first iteration that we had was really relying on donations from readers or even just our own internal funding for student access, but that wasn't sustainable. And then we kind of did some, reflection, internally. And what we kind of agreed on was the reason why, or the big issue that we had was we weren't able to verify who was a student or not. If I use Nigerian students as an example, a lot of students didn't necessarily have student numbers. A lot of students didn't necessarily have student email addresses that you could verify. So it was very difficult to, at scale, really verify students. And so the next question for us then became, well, what if you didn't ask for verification? What if you just told students to, that this was a plan for them, but you would design the plan in such a way that you would get to know them even closer, and you would get to know, and you would get to kind of work with them over time. And so we kind of designed 2 student plans, one which was a monthly plan, and then the other, which is an annual student plan as well, which is kind of the ideal plan that we always try to persuade and steer students to. The idea there is when we get student subscribers who take out the annual membership plan, we actually get to know who they are. They're able to reach out to us for editorial guidance, research assistance, exclusive trainings and workshops. And we use those opportunities to actually verify who they are. But then it also acts as a deterrent, because there's no reason why you would take out an annual student subscription if you're not willing to kind of, get to know who, you don't want to kind of have some face time with us. And so that's kind of what we've been experimenting for a couple of months now. And right now it's still very much in an experimental phase. But then we've actually made one, key insight from there, which is that using this student base is actually also opening up opportunities to have further discussions with their universities, which is another area that we've been actively looking into as well. So initially we started out with the individual subscriptions, and then we launched offside, things like gift subscriptions, where in which people can buy subscriptions for themselves or for their friends or for their loved ones, for their families. And then we launched this, package called the Republic for Students, which is what I just spoke about. And now we're looking at how we can bridge the gap between the Republic for Students and institutions. We're looking at something that we're trying to call the Republic for Educators, which would be a corporate subscription or an institutional subscription that would cover both students and educators within particular institutions. And we're actively working with institutions in Nigeria and also speaking to a couple of institutions both in the UK and the US as well. And then we also have in the back burner one that's forthcoming, which is the print and digital subscriptions. Because like I mentioned, we actually produce a print magazine. And from the people that buy the print magazine, we've realized that they would like to buy it regularly. But one of the things that we've been very careful at doing is not wasting or overproducing print. So one of the things that we're also really being conscious of is producing print as part of a subscription, so that it's always measured and can be easily tracked and easily contained. And some key things that we've actually been learning throughout this process, there's really like 4 major things that we're keeping our eyes on and that are really shaping the ways in which we plan on evolving and developing our subscription models, our membership models as let's say in the next 3 to 5 years. The first thing is really the idea that consumer spending is coming out more so than advertising as more reliable and more resilient. One thing that a lot of debates and discussions around subscription models and membership models right now are kind of agreeing on is that COVID-19 in particular has actually changed the ways in which consumer spending and advertising spending make up revenue lines for a lot of media businesses. And for a startup, this is a really good place to be in, primarily because as a startup, unlike traditional media companies, you actually are closer to your audience, it's very easy for you to actually know what it is that your audience is looking for. It's very easy for you to actually, be very intimate with your audience. And that's actually something that comes up in lesson 4. But the main thing here is really that there's a lot more value in consumers, and actually consumers are willing to spend more. One of the things that we actually noticed throughout COVID-19 since 2020 was actually a bump in readership and also in readership engagement levels, and people willing to take out subscriptions simply because a lot more people are spending time, online and, using digital tools as well. And then the second thing that we've also learned is one thing that when I started the Republic, one thing that people always told me was subscriptions are not going to work here. No one is interested in subscriptions here. But one thing that you actually realize is we've actually been using subscriptions for a very long time in very different industries. One of those industries is the pay TV industry, which actually dominates in terms of media growth and in terms of digital media contributions. So when you're looking at things like DSTV. So one of the questions that I always have for myself, and one of the questions that I always have for my team is, what is it that DSTV did, to kind of scale across Nigeria? How were they able to create awareness around subscriptions? So it's not necessarily saying that, that everybody in Nigeria understands how subscriptions work, but it's actually looking at how you can, what you can learn from the experience of, media companies like DSTV, or even when you look at mobile subscriptions, MTN, Glo, and how they were able to really penetrate beyond, what digital communities and actually even going into into mass markets. One of the very interesting things that we're looking at is how subscriptions will change, or how subscriptions can actually shape services like mobile news coverage, like even audio news coverage as well, which give you the opportunity to actually reach people beyond beyond social media circles. And when I'm thinking about scale, I'm looking at those key segments as opportunities as well. And then the third thing that we're actually looking at is really having a very clear and specific underserved group that people are trying to, that your company or your media organization is trying to serve. One thing that has been very, very crucial, or that has come out in terms of organizations that we model ourselves after, or organizations that that we consider to be successful media startups, is that they're very clear about who they're solving a problem for and what problem it is that they're serving. But then, of course, like this actually changes when you bring it to an African context, because unlike platforms like the Juggernaut and the Athletic, which are based in the US, we actually have a lot more fundamental challenges as well. We're looking at infrastructural issues. We're looking at technological issues around building out subscription products and even making it easier for people to pay, whether it's through cash or whether it's through transfers as well. But then you're also looking at the digital skills issue, or the digital skills challenge that I mentioned at the beginning, which is something that doesn't actually get a lot of attention. And why, and what makes digital skills and digital talent the elephant in the room here is that for a subscription media company, at least from what our own audiences tell us, the difference, or why people pay for a digital service, or the kinds of people that pay for a digital service. If I use the Republic for an example, we got our first early adopters were people based in the diaspora. These are people that are exposed to high quality publications. And so for them, they're looking for publications that can actually meet the same standards. And so it then, you then have to start thinking about ways in which you can top up, or you can support the levels of skills that are locally available, or that you can kind of innovate around those types of challenges as well, or that you can actually collaborate as well, because these are issues that not one startup or not one media company can solve. And so those are the kinds of conversations that I think that, also need to be brought into, conversations about subscriptions, because at the end of the day, those are the kinds of, it's those interventions that actually make it easier to produce, content that actually is valuable, is valued, to people. And then the fourth thing is that ultimately audiences want a relationship that's much more than just payments. So it's not about subscribers in these days. It's also about just, it's about building supporters. It's about building, a following as well. One of the things that was very crucial to us in terms of growing our subscription base was the ways in which we were able to cover things like protests, or the ways in which we've been able to advocate for certain, for certain social causes that we are in line with. And so what we're finding is that there's a lot of interest in mission-driven, news publications. There's a lot of interest, particularly among young audiences. So young audiences don't necessarily, move towards neutral or seemingly, distant, media, traditional media companies. And that's also where that concept of media accountability becomes really important, because if people feel like they're paying you or they're paying a monthly subscription to your publication, it's not just that it's not just about paying a certain amount. It's also being a part of something larger than themselves. It's also contributing to something larger than themselves and looking at how they can channel subscriptions towards, towards missions that are actually aligned with their own, personal ideologies as well. And so that's another area that, that has become like a major focus for us. And in terms of where we then see opportunities going forward, it's really looking at other, communities that we serve that we can also start to build subscription or membership products around. So for example, I'd mentioned students, but then also increasingly, we're seeing a lot of interest within our own author community around potential areas that we can provide support, or we can even provide, or that we can even provide services. And so it then even goes beyond editorial as a product. It also starts to look at the ways in which, you can possibly support a freelance community through things like access to opportunities, through things like access to trainings, and through things like even access to, even like, global clients as well. And so and so for us, it's really looking at how, we can even get further in terms of the relationships that we have with our communities, and also even more specific with who those communities are. So already at the moment, we've dimensioned them into students, we've dimensioned them into authors, we've dimensioned them into readers, we've dimensioned them into institutions. And so for us going forward, it will be about, deepening those relationships, but then also looking at how we can explore, or we can even identify relationships beyond, beyond those communities as well. And I think that wraps up my my session. But if anyone has any questions, I'm very open to answering anything. I know I kind of sped through it all, but very happy to give more comments as well.
Thank you so much, Wale. This was such an interesting presentation, and yes, we will go into the questions a bit later on. There's a lot of quotables, I must say. You're like a quotable person. I like what you said about centering Africa through Africans, and also just the lessons learned have been very reflective on some of the things. When I'm listening to you, I was reflecting on how or why I've stopped certain subscriptions in the past year or so, where it just felt like there was no relationship. It was just this thing of being spammed, and it felt like a money grabbing exercise. So really looking forward to engaging more on some of the information that you've just given us. And with that, I would like to move to Musa Ngom. And like I said earlier on, just a reminder that Musa will be giving his presentation in French. So please go to the bottom of your screen on the right next to the Q&A button, and just click on English. It's the translation services for Zoom, and click on English so you can hear the translator as Musa gives his presentation. Musa, please do kick it off. We're looking forward to hearing from you as well.
D'accord. Merci, Poncho. Bonjour à tous. Je vais apporter une touche de français à la conférence. Donc, je suis Moussa Ngom, coordinateur du média La Maison des Reporters. La Maison des Reporters, c'est un média qu'on a créé au Sénégal, un pays d'Afrique de l'Ouest. C'est un média qui a toute une philosophie derrière, parce qu'il a été créé pour permettre aux journalistes d'avoir le temps, d'avoir les moyens et d'avoir la liberté d'enquêter et de traiter l'information en profondeur, parce que c'est une véritable équation ici au Sénégal. On a des rédactions qui sont très souvent en sous-effectif, qui sont très marquées par des conflits d'intérêts dans le traitement de l'information, parce que la propriété médiatique, les médias sont souvent la propriété d'hommes politiques ou bien de bailleurs de fonds qui évoluent dans l'économie. Et il y a pas mal de conflits d'intérêts qui naissent de là. Donc, c'est un média qui compte 113 reporters et techniciens à travers le Sénégal, parce que comment est-ce que nous travaillons? On a constitué une sorte de réseau à travers lequel on collabore sur des enquêtes, c'est-à-dire que dans les différentes régions du Sénégal, nous avons des membres qui peuvent être soit journalistes, soit caméramans, Et on les associe dans le cadre d'enquête et ils peuvent également nous proposer des sujets de reportage sur lesquels ils veulent travailler. Et nous, à notre niveau, on les accompagne financièrement, on les accompagne également intellectuellement dans le cadre de leur traitement d'informations. Et c'est dans ce cadre-là qu'on a eu à recevoir pas mal de récompenses. Par exemple, durant les 2 dernières années, parce que le média a été créé en 2019, durant ces 2 dernières années, nous avons gagné le meilleur article de presse en ligne. C'est un média de presse en ligne. Nous avons gagné le meilleur article de presse en ligne au Sénégal. Également, la meilleure enquête en Afrique de l'Ouest sur le domaine de la santé. Mais avant de comprendre d'où est née la maison des reporters, il faut aussi comprendre le contexte. Donc, le contexte, c'est une grande dépendance des médias locaux à la publicité et à la subvention de l'État. Et cette grande dépendance-là, elle va créer un problème au niveau des médias parce que ceux qui donnent les publicités sont souvent portés à vouloir avoir un droit de regard sur le traitement de l'information. C'est-à-dire qu'on ne va pas vouloir qu'on parle de sa marque ou on ne veut pas on parle mal de la marque, également la publicité qui provient de l'État. Souvent, c'est conditionné par le fait de ne pas mal parler des politiques du gouvernement. Donc, il y a ça. Il y a également un constat que nous avions fait, c'était la rareté des investigations, notamment dans la presse en ligne. Il y a également beaucoup de conflits d'intérêts dans le traitement de l'information et surtout, il y avait une concentration de l'information dans la capitale, c'est-à-dire que tous les médias presque au Sénégal sont basés à Dakar et traitent essentiellement de l'actualité de Dakar, qui est la capitale du Sénégal. Donc, pour ce qui est du reste des régions du Sénégal, qui sont les 13 autres régions du Sénégal, il n'y avait quasiment pas d'information, quasiment pas d'enquête en profondeur. Il y a de l'information, certes, mais cette information, elle était plus ou moins légère. Donc, nous, on s'est proposé d'aller à l'intérieur du pays, de voyager, d'enquêter sur des sujets qui étaient des enjeux là-bas. Et là, qu'est-ce qui explique aussi le modèle d'abonnement que nous avons créé, parce que c'est la seule source, c'est notre seule source de revenus à notre niveau. C'est notre seule source de revenus. Ensuite, il faut comprendre pourquoi est-ce que c'est également un modèle d'abonnement qui est particulier, c'est que nos contenus, ils sont gratuits. C'est-à-dire que le lecteur, il n'a pas besoin d'être abonné pour consulter nos informations, parce que nous, on cible la masse populaire. Et malheureusement, on s'est rendu compte qu'effectivement, je disais tout à l'heure que nous avions décentralisé l'information pour essayer de toucher beaucoup plus les régions de l'intérieur du pays qui ne sont pas que la capitale. Et les sources de revenus à ce niveau-là, ils sont plus ou moins faibles. C'est-à-dire que le niveau de vie n'est pas très élevé. Et pour payer pour avoir de l'information, ce n'est pas très évident pour eux. Donc, nous voulions que ce soit accessible, que l'information que nous traitions soit accessible parce que ce n'est pas intéressant de faire des enquêtes sur un sujet dans une région donnée et que les habitants de cette région ne soient pas en mesure de lire cette information. Parce que nous, ce qu'on veut, c'est impacter sur l'opinion publique par une information de qualité. C'est donc pour cela que nos contenus sont gratuits d'accès. Donc, tous les dons que nous recevons, nous considérons ça comme des victoires parce que l'abonné, il n'a pas nécessairement à faire une donation pour lire nos informations. Donc, s'il le fait, c'est parce qu'il sait que le travail que nous faisons est intéressant et il a besoin de soutenir ce travail d'information. C'est également une nouveauté au Sénégal parce que très souvent, les médias qui sont ici ne voulaient pas bouger dans le sens de médias participatifs, ne voulaient pas faire participer les abonnés au financement de l'information parce qu'on se disait que c'était un potentiel qui n'était pas là, que c'était un modèle qui ne pouvait pas être viable au Sénégal. Donc, beaucoup ont eu peur d'implémenter ce modèle-là dans leur rédaction. Donc, nous, on le fait pour nous. Ensuite, on le fait pour que le paysage médiatique puisse s'en inspirer. C'est-à-dire que quelles sont les leçons qu'on peut tirer de l'expérience de la Maison des reporters, quels sont les défis que la Maison des reporters rencontre, quels sont les obstacles que la Maison des reporters rencontre. C'est pour permettre aussi aux autres médias de savoir qu'est-ce qu'il faut faire et qu'est-ce qu'il ne faut pas faire. C'est pourquoi on aime beaucoup communiquer là-dessus, sur le projet, pour permettre aux autres également de mieux comprendre comment s'y prendre. Donc, pourquoi aussi on a choisi ce modèle? Parce que lorsqu'on se présente comme un média d'investigation, il y a un certain nombre de choses à fixer. Donc, surtout pour l'indépendance des médias et pour essayer de faire en sorte qu'il n'y ait pas de conflit d'intérêt dans le traitement de l'information. Puisque nous traitons souvent de sujets qui sont plus ou moins tabous, de sujets qui impliquent des intérêts économiques et financiers, de sujets qui concernent les hommes politiques ou bien les hommes qui sont très présents dans l'espace public, on a besoin de sources de financement qui ne traitent pas équivoque, c'est-à-dire qui ne posent pas de problème et qui ne va pas créer de suspicion, parce qu'il y a une très grande suspicion au Sénégal et qui est due notamment au financement des médias. Donc, je parlais tout à l'heure également du bas niveau de revenus des ménages au Sénégal. Donc, payer pour de l'information n'est pas une priorité de dépense. Donc, c'est pourquoi également, on a travaillé sur ce modèle-là. Et notre challenge, c'est d'attirer le maximum de lecteurs grâce à la qualité de notre travail. Ce qui fait la particularité de notre modèle d'abonnement, c'est qu'on compte beaucoup sur le contenu de notre travail, sur le travail que nous faisons et sur les sujets sur lesquels nous traitons à notre niveau. Donc, les points forts de la maison des reporters, c'est la différence de contenu. Ça, on ne joue pas avec ça, on est très sérieux sur ça. On ne veut pas faire un contenu qui est le même que celui qui est réalisé par le reste des médias ici au Sénégal. C'est-à-dire que, vous parlez tout à l'heure de la rate des investigations, parce que dans le programme médiatique, lorsque vous regardez à la télé, il n'y a aucun programme qui est dédié à de l'enquête, bien qui fait de l'enquête vidéo. Donc, c'est pour cela que nous sommes positionnés dans ce sens avec des enquêtes sur différents sujets, comme une série d'enquêtes sur la corruption. Également, il y a des enquêtes sur le trafic de médicaments, il y a des enquêtes sur différents autres sujets. Et notre singularité, c'est vraiment cela. Ensuite, il y a une certaine pédagogie que nous faisons, parce qu'au Sénégal, il y a une conception que beaucoup ont, parce que malheureusement, comme je le disais tout à l'heure, le média, notre modèle économique, il est nouveau, c'est que l'information, elle tombe du ciel, c'est-à-dire qu'elle ne requiert, il n'y a pas besoin de mettre de moyens sur de l'information par exemple, pour enquêter, pour réaliser une enquête, pour voyager à l'intérieur du pays, pour sortir une information. Beaucoup pensent que c'est gratuit, parce que le reste des médias proposent une information qui est plus ou moins gratuite. Donc, nous, dans notre démarche d'information, on fait en sorte que le public comprenne que nous y mettons des moyens, beaucoup de moyens, et que ça coûte également des efforts qui méritent d'être soutenus. Parce que cet aspect-là aussi, il manque à être pris en compte par les médias, parce qu'on ne communique pas assez sur les finances, on ne communique pas assez sur les moyens que demande l'investigation. Donc, également dans ce sens-là, encore mieux encourager les abonnés à faire des dons à la maison des reporters, on a instauré une transparence dans l'utilisation des fonds. Et ça aussi, c'est une nouveauté au Sénégal, parce que très souvent, les états financiers des entreprises ne sont pas connus du public. On ne sait pas qui finance, on ne sait pas pour quel montant on finance, on ne sait pas voilà, l'intérêt de ceux qui financent. Donc, nous, on publie un rapport annuel où on fait l'état de tous les dons que nous avons reçus au cours de l'année. Et comment est-ce que nous les avons utilisés et quelles sont également les perspectives du média. Ça permet aux autres de mieux voir quelle est l'économie du média, qu'est-ce qu'ils peuvent y gagner en termes de qualité de l'information en investissant dans ce média-là. Et voilà, est-ce que le média fait une utilisation nette et saine des fonds qu'il donne, que les abonnés donnent. Donc, il y a ça. Donc, par rapport à l'expérimentation de notre modèle d'abonnement, on peut dire qu'il y a eu deux phases. Durant la première phase, on était très dépendant du niveau d'innovation technologique. Pourquoi? Parce qu'il n'y avait pas de moyen de collecter les paiements pour ceux qui voulaient le faire. Donc, qu'est-ce qu'on faisait? On était obligé de se déplacer vers l'abonné pour recueillir l'argent du don, pour recueillir le don en tant que tel. Donc, ça, c'était très, très compliqué de faire comme ça. Et il y avait également le mobile money qui est assez plus ou moins répandu au Sénégal. Mais malheureusement, puisque nous n'avions pas une plateforme qui nous permettait de collecter ces paiements-là, on avait une grande difficulté du point de vue comptable pour effectivement faire une traçabilité de ces paiements-là. et pour recevoir ces paiements. Et également, une des grandes difficultés, c'est que nous n'étions pas en mesure de collecter les dons qui provenaient de la diaspora, notamment parce que eux, ils utilisaient la carte bancaire. Nous n'avions pas un moyen de recueillir leurs dons via carte bancaire. C'était une très grande difficulté pour nous. Et du côté de ceux qui habitent au Sénégal, le taux de bancarisation, il est très, très faible. Il est à moins de 10%. Donc, c'est sur la mobile money qu'on pouvait miser pour collecter des paiements. Mais on va voir ça tout à l'heure. Donc, il y a la dépendance du niveau d'innovation technologique. Mais heureusement, durant la deuxième phase, ce qui s'est passé, c'est qu'il y a eu une plateforme qui permet d'agréger les paiements qui s'appelle Paydunia. Donc, il y a différents moyens de paiement qui passent par la mobile monnaie. Et grâce à ces moyens de paiement-là, nous étions en mesure d'atteindre plus ou moins presque tout le Sénégal, parce que ceux qui ont un numéro de téléphone, les réseaux mobiles, les opérateurs mobiles disposent d'une plateforme de paiement mobile. Donc, c'est via le téléphone que tout se passe. Et grâce à Paydunia, nous allions pouvoir recevoir les paiements de la part de toutes les personnes qui voulaient soutenir le média, la Maison des reporters. Donc, c'est grâce à ça que nous avons introduit donc l'abonnement mensuel, parce qu'auparavant, avec l'abonnement annuel, c'était plus ou moins élevé, notamment pour le niveau de revenu. Certains ne pouvaient pas se le permettre parce que c'était trop élevé, mais lorsqu'on introduit l'abonnement mensuel, ça permet, en divisant le montant de l'abonnement par 12, ça permet d'avoir un montant qui est assez faible et qui va pousser beaucoup plus d'abonnés à financer, à soutenir le média, la Maison des reporters. Donc, il y a eu également la possibilité de paiement via les différents moyens de mobile monnaie, de services qui sont ici au Sénégal. Comme je le disais, le taux de pénétration du mobile, il est plus ou moins élevé. Donc, grâce à cela, nous avons élargi notre palette de réception de dons. Mais il y a des obstacles que nous avons rencontrés malgré cela, malgré les innovations que nous avons eues durant notre deuxième phase d'abonnement. Les obstacles, c'était quoi? C'est un média qui est jeune, qui a été créé par de jeunes personnes, qui est là depuis 2 ans, qui n'a pas une célébrité pareille que certains grands médias qui sont ici au Sénégal. Mais je vais revenir là-dessus pour montrer pourquoi est-ce que l'obstacle aussi, c'est par rapport à la jeunesse du média. Mais ce qu'il faut aussi retenir, c'est que un des plus grands défis que nous avons, c'est qu'il y a un quart des potentiels abonnés qui sont perdus à cause de quoi? À cause de l'absence de maîtrise des technologies. C'est-à-dire que lorsqu'ils se rendent sur notre plateforme de paiement, ils ne savent pas comment faire. Soit ils peuvent savoir comment faire, mais malheureusement, la plateforme de paiement également, le processus, il est plus ou moins lourd. Pourquoi? Parce que la plateforme de paiement a besoin de garantir la sécurité des paiements. Et cette garantie de sécurité-là, elle conduit à un certain nombre de processus que l'abonné doit passer pour pouvoir effectuer son paiement. Il y en a beaucoup qui abandonnent la procédure en cours de route parce que soit ils ne savent pas comment s'y prendre, malgré la pédagogie que nous avons utilisée pour alléger le processus de paiement. Il y a également la lourdeur du processus de paiement parce qu'on a besoin d'authentifier le propriétaire du numéro de téléphone avant qu'il ne puisse procéder à son paiement, et ça conduit à décourager certains d'effectuer le paiement. Donc, les défis que nous avons identifiés, d'abord par rapport à la jeunesse du média, c'est que beaucoup ne connaissent pas encore le média. Donc, il y a un très grand challenge du côté des projets. En tout cas, on en parle beaucoup aux projets qui veulent se créer ici au Sénégal. On leur dit de beaucoup communiquer sur leur projet parce que tant qu'on ne communique pas là-dessus, beaucoup ne vont pas être au courant de ce qu'on fait, beaucoup ne vont pas savoir comment on le fait. Et voilà. Nous, notre constat, c'est que plus notre contenu part vers le public, plus on gagne d'abonnés. Donc, c'est une relation de dépendance parce que nous, déjà, on travaille sur notre contenu. On fait en sorte que notre contenu soit d'une très, très grande qualité. Mais si ce contenu soit de très, très grande qualité, il faut faire attention à ce que ce contenu-là accède au maximum de public. Parce que notre objectif, c'est d'atteindre le maximum de public et que dans ce public-là, il y ait des personnes qui vont s'abonner pour soutenir les médias. Donc, il faut beaucoup communiquer, il faut un grand budget marketing pour, pour communiquer sur les réseaux sociaux, pour faire en sorte que les informations que nous traitons soient portées à l'attention du public. Il y a une très grande série, par exemple, sur la corruption, qui a été relayée plusieurs fois et pour lesquelles nous avons beaucoup intervenu sur les médias nationaux et internationaux pour en parler. Ça a beaucoup permis également d'engranger beaucoup plus d'abonnés. Donc, l'autre défi également, c'est d'établir un lien direct. On va essayer d'avoir un partenariat avec les applications de mobile money. Donc, plutôt que de passer par la plateforme qui agrégeait ces moyens de paiement, on va aller directement vers ces services de paiement mobile-là. Donc, comme ça, l'abonné, il va avoir la possibilité de s'abonner en 2-3 gestes. Donc, plutôt que là où il devait se rendre sur notre site, remplir un formulaire, authentifier son numéro. Là, lorsqu'on aura fini d'établir ce partenariat avec les applications de mobile money, l'abonné il aura juste à se rendre sur son application qui est sur son téléphone et il y a un onglet qui concerne la maison des reporters. Il fait son don directement et ça se passe en moins de 30 secondes. Contrairement au processus actuel où il a besoin d'1 minute, 1 minute 30. Donc, on pense que cela sera un bon moyen d'avoir beaucoup plus d'abonnés. Et merci pour votre attention.
Thank you so much, Musa, for that. And without further ado, because I'm looking at the time and regarding the fact that we have to still have a discussion and go through some of the questions, just like to introduce Yvette Demiri. Please take over, Yvette. We're looking forward to hearing what you've learned at Steers Business.
Okay, thank you so much. So let me just share my screen. Okay, great. That should be in presenter mode, but let me know if there's anything. All right, so today I'm going to spend a bit of time just going through essentially a retrospective and thinking about, the fundamental question: was it a good idea to launch a subscription at Steers Business? Listening to my colleagues on the panel, Yvonne, Wale, and Musa, I can already tell that there's a lot of the same points are coming up, and I think it's just really crucial to highlight those again. So let's get started. So most days very much feel like this this meme where there's fire, but you're trying to stay calm and make sure operations are running smoothly. But really, I think when we stop to think about our journey so far, which has been about a year since launching the subscription, I think there are a few things we can point to. But first, a few things about me, just how I got here. So I started my career working in oil and gas, completely unrelated, except for possibly some analytical skills I picked up there. Then I transitioned my career to media, where I worked for Nigeria's first business publication, very much traditional media, print, but undergoing a digital transformation at the time I was there. And after that, I then moved to Steers Business, where I worked as a growth editor initially, and then transitioned to product manager as we launched our subscription business. And so that's where I am today, and that's sort of the point of view that I'm bringing. So very much started in the newsroom, then transitioned into thinking about the digital product. So when we think about what's working, I think we can really point to 3 things. So it's a product-led growth, using analytics to inform our decision-making, and alignment within the team. So I'll just spend some time talking about each of those briefly. I always find it useful to start with this visual, which kind of encapsulates, I think, the subscription journey, at least for us. So it's like a graph called the Dunning-Kruger effect. And so the basic idea is that when you start your subscription journey, you're at your most confident and probably your least experienced, and you're really happy, everything's exciting, you're sliding down this fun slide that the New York Times has said has worked so wonderfully for them. And then of course, very quickly, you reach what's called the valley of despair, where all the problems start coming to light, right? And then, you have to do your best. It really tests your resolve. But of course, as your experience grows, even though your confidence might take a hit, I think, but at that point, you begin to achieve some sort of enlightenment and some understanding of what needs to be done for this to be really successful. So when I think about what's working for Steer's business, I think our product-led approach has been particularly useful. So one thing that's become sort of clear is that the organization had to be structured in order to pull off this digital product properly. So the way we are currently set up is very much, I would say the newsroom is still front and center. That's where all the content is coming from. Then we have our growth related teams, and then we have our delivery team where our engineers, analytics, and product development sits. And then all three come together in this cross-functional team for called Steer's Business Product and Technology. And the reason that's been particularly useful is because I think unlike with traditional media where like a sales function might have led the growth of advertising or even of circulation, we now know it very much has to be driven, growth has to be driven by engineering and product development. So this is whether it comes to user acquisition, managing retention, conversion, et cetera. It's very much dependent on the quality of product that you're putting out for consumers, for your readers. Sorry, just go back. So the second thing I'll point out that has worked well for us is analytics. So we know that, we have the usual suite of analytics, of course, Google Analytics. But one thing we're very mindful of is how our revenue is tied, how we monitor our revenue. So, and how we experiment around changes that we make. So one very classic example that we always point to is when we try to dollarize our payments. So in Nigeria, our central bank governor, he has a bit of an embattled relationship with the dollar. So there's usually a scarcity for dollars, fluctuating exchange rate. So we said, you know what, let's just nudge our customers as much as possible to all pay us in dollars. And so when we did that, it was near catastrophe. So on this chart, you can see how the failure rates spiked when we changed the default payments, default subscription amounts to be in dollars. But it was much more than just a failure rate. Our actual revenue went down, and we have about like 7 different charts sort of showing us the impact of that decision. Of course, it's been changed now, but I just wanted to highlight just sort of this importance of really paying attention to your analytics and how your decisions, what the impact of your decisions is. The third thing that's gone really well for us is alignment. Of course, it's something that we continue to work on, but I remember right before we launched the subscription, we essentially held like a 3-day boot camp, really to align us and to make sure that we're all speaking the same language. I think it's all well and good if 1 or 2 people understand subscription mechanics and retention and acquisition and all these different language, different words that you have to introduce, but it's so much more productive when everyone on the team is speaking the same language. And every quarter we repeat the same, more or less the same thing through our setting of objectives and key results. And that's where we all align on what the priorities for the company and for each team are every year. Yeah, so now on to what's not working. And for us, it's really one thing, and it's been mentioned both by Wale and by Musa to some extent. It's subscriptions infrastructure. So what we know is that I think very much publishers on the African continent might be at a disadvantage compared to European and American peers, in the sense that as an early player, you really begin to discover the deficits and the lack of a billing infrastructure. whether it's related to how easy it is for your customers to pay, how easy it is for you to collect USD revenue if you don't have a company registered abroad. So there are a couple of things that we've begun to notice rather. So what's clear is that there are actually many off-the-shelf billing solutions and subscription management, but they seem all a little bit unsuited for the African publisher. So whether that's because they are not integrated with payment gateways that work for your local customer. So for example, if you think about one of the larger payment gateways like Stripe, and the failure rates that Nigerian cards tend to have with Stripe, and it repeats itself in a couple of different gateways. And then you talk about, okay, well, what if we want to pursue this subscription manager? What are the setup fees? And in our research, we've seen some tools that can cost up to 250,000 naira, dollars rather, to integrate with. So really exorbitant. So what we found is that there really is a lack of infrastructure that sort of prioritizes local payment solutions. So I think that feeds quite neatly into how we're thinking about subscriptions in the future and what we need to adopt. So first things first is we've recognized a need for more off-the-shelf solutions, especially for publishers who are pursuing this subscription model. And so one of the things that we've sort of pivoted to is beginning to build out those solutions for publishers. We were recently announced about a month ago, we received this grant from the Google News Initiative to pursue just this. And the basic idea here is that it's already hard enough to convert readers into subscribers, but when you're missing the key infrastructure that's needed to do that, we're just even at a deeper disadvantage there. The second thing I'll highlight that that's top of our mind is really digital product innovation. So I put this this quote on here. I think CEO of New York Times was asked about what will be important as the New York Times is pushing towards their 10 million subscriber mark. And she mentioned, of course, the quality and the breadth of the journalism, which, at least in my presentation, I've taken for granted, but many of the other presenters have spent time focusing on the editorial quality. And of course, digital product innovation. Like Wale from the Republic mentioned, you are now putting out a digital product that is competing with every other the best digital products in the world. So we know for a fact that about 80% of our customers have Netflix subscriptions, right? So that means that they're expecting the same quality, ease of use, the same innovation. And I think that's true for any publisher that's creating a digital product. Sorry, just to go back here briefly, and this is really hard to achieve, right? We know that the skills gap we need to find a way to cross the skills gap. It's possible that engineers are moving, at least they're leaving Nigeria. We see that quite often. So getting that talent is something quite difficult to achieve. And then finally, we know that the sort of experiment that we've had with product development inside Steers has led us to think about how we might apply product thinking to content strategy. So here I've just sort of taken a screenshot of this. It's called the user needs model that was developed by the BBC. And the basic idea is, asking yourself constantly how your content is fulfilling your user needs. And user needs is something that's very much takes its origin in product development, because software in product, you're always sort of thinking about how you build software to solve user problems. So I think this is one important sort of shift that we're beginning to think more about. So pleased to say that we have actually never internally asked this question, whether it was a good idea to launch a subscription. And I think that's because for us, it's been very clear, a very clear success. So yes, I think I'll end there for today and happy to stay on for any questions.
Thank you so much, Yvette, and thank you to all our speakers. I think we have finally reached the place where we kind of have conversations. And it's been so interesting listening to each and every one of the speakers, and you talk about what are some of the challenges that you faced in rolling out this. And also what I particularly enjoyed about everyone's presentation is the contextualizing within the realities of Africa. What are our limitations and what are our strengths as well? And I think sometimes as somebody who really in a previous job spent a lot of time trying to start up a subscription or membership model, one of my biggest frustrations was really listening to people from the US or UK talk about it, or even India, right, where the population is so high, the digital infiltration rates are so high as well. So mobile money are things that are easily accessible and everything. But it was interesting for me to listen to what are some of the challenges that are uniquely African, and how perhaps then we can think about solving these issues, and how even though we have these issues, it doesn't mean that we should stop. And I think one of the conversations would be around how, I think one of my biggest frustrations as well, this is a very personal question, is around how audiences are accustomed to free content. And I see online people that I know have the means to subscribe, means to membership, means to pay for news media, means to really spend money on journalism, on quality journalism, just simply refuse. And I think one of the things I remember reading even during the pandemic is around how we should have made, all news organizations should have made their COVID content free to read. And there's this big divide around within our industry whether this was the right thing to do, and I don't want us to go into that. But how do we convince a readership in Africa that really they're particularly the ones that have the means to subscribe, because we do understand that not everyone has the means, but how do we convince that audience to pay when they're so accustomed to free content? And what is the percentage of the audiences that we can think about retaining through subscriptions? Or should we just face the reality that we are going to lose readers the minute you want to put up a paywall or read? I think I'll just open that question up to everyone, because from all the presentations I was hearing, this is a common thread or common issue that's there. But Yvette, maybe you can kick us off, since you are you believe. When I saw that slide, I'm just like you. I believe in paywalls. I think they're important. I think it is one of the ways we're going to keep quality journalism alive in the future. So what do you think? And then I'll come to you, Wale, and then Musa, and then Food from Zanzi.
So I'll be honest, that initial friction of people saying, oh, another paywall, why do we have to pay for this? I think we saw it a lot at the beginning when we announced that we were going to launch. But it never really concerned us. I think we just accepted that over time. And we did see this. There were some sort of flyby visitors that we saw diminish over time. And I think that might be true for most publishers. But I think the people that's why, it's come up here. It's so important to know who you're serving, right? And we knew exactly who we're serving based on some surveys that we did initially. And those people who already had subscriptions, that was really important to us, identifying that most of our base were already paying for some subscription in some way, shape, or form. So I think that gave us a lot of confidence in plowing through and knowing that they would pay for quality journalism.
At the core of it is really delivering a product that is worth the money and making it worth their while, or making subscribers worth their while to spend that money. Well, I see you nodding there, so I'm assuming you agree.
No, yeah, I definitely agree. I think the way that I think about it, right, it's two things. One, and I really liked what Yvette said about looking at people who actually already have subscriptions, because one of the things that really becomes clear is, yes, there might be people who are making decisions between maybe one publication or the other. But what I've always increasingly found is that a lot of people actually will take out more than one subscription. They will take out 2, they will take out 3. But then increasingly, where I'm kind of always looking at is there are people who are kind of outside of at least what the ways in which we understand subscriptions to work. So what I mean by that, and that's why I really liked, and I was going to ask Musa some questions as well, which is, when you're dealing with people who want to send you transfers, when you're dealing with people who want to subscribe. I mean, I was talking to one of my uncles recently, and he was asking, how can he subscribe? Do we do, because back in the day, or when he used to read publications, they would have these slips in the magazines and they would fill them with, and I'm like, yeah, I remember those when I was younger, but like, I mean, to start doing that again. And so for me, it's kind of like, one of the things that a lot of Nigerians always say, or people in Nigeria always tell me is that, oh, subscriptions can never work here, they don't work, etc. But the thing is that they worked at some point, they did, and they actually had, a lot of people, or at least a sizable amount of people who were part of that culture of like buying subscriptions. It didn't necessarily look the way that, that we had it. But my own question has always then been, what does subscriptions look like, or what do subscriptions look like beyond, beyond Twitter, beyond Instagram, beyond even the internet, where, I think media is beginning to do some really, really exciting things. I think, people, I mean, I was speaking to somebody about these. So, with MTN, I don't know if it's the same in South Africa, but with MTN here, people can pay. They can pay MTN, and MTN will send them every day or every month or something. Sometimes it's love jokes, all these, those are subscriptions, and people pay for those things to happen. And for me, it's always a question of how do you then, cross over, or what can you learn from those types of relationships as well, where people don't necessarily feel like this is something alien to me, but something that's also part of what I'm also, quite used to. And so increasingly, I also find that, there's what we think subscriptions are, but then there's also like a wild range of things that it could be as well. And a lot of the times, people are actually receptive to more forms of it than we know, or than we're used to.
Yes, Wale, as you said, those little slips, I remember them very, very clearly from my childhood. And I used to wonder what they were. One that I remember quite clearly was the Reader's Digest one. My father was a subscriber of Reader's Digest all my life. And we have in our storeroom, we have lots and lots of copies of Reader's Digest. So subscription is not something new, as you're saying. And, I'm seeing that we are officially out of time, and I'd like to just take a little advantage for 10 more minutes so we can wrap up this discussion quite nicely. And one of the questions that's there, because since Yvette and Wale have given, and I'll throw this one to Musa, Kobus, and Ivo, which is around how much would we charge for subscriptions? How do you decide that? And I think particularly this is important when we think about African audiences and, the question about who we serve. The reality is that we live in a country, or we live in a continent where many people are robbing Peter to pay Paul and are living, on very little means. And these are some of the people that we want to serve particularly and help inform so that they're empowered citizens. So with that context, how do we then make sure that we are pricing our subscription rates in the right way? Kobus, I see, I would like you to, and Ivo to go first, and then Musa can go.
Okay. I must say we don't have the answer to that question yet. Apart from affordability, I mean, in principle, we feel that our basic content will always be free, because part of our brand ethos is representing people whose stories are not told anywhere else. And I don't know in other countries if to what extent it's another problem. But we also face the affordability issue in terms of data. there's a huge digital divide in South Africa because data to view video and websites on is extremely expensive, unaffordable to many ordinary people in South Africa. So we find the micropayment sort of option quite interesting. We haven't got the answer yet, but as we see it, we are lucky in the sense that we've got this farmer audience where we can actually we set ourselves the challenge to produce content that's so useful to them in terms of helping them be better farmers and do better business, that they are rewarding us with their data and they are finding it valuable enough to subscribe. And the next step would be for us to make that content valuable enough for them to actually put down money for it. But we actually haven't even started on trying to figure out the pricing.
Thank you so much, Kobus. Musa, is there anything else you'd like to add to how do you price subscription prices, And I think it's an interesting question for you, particularly because of all the panelists, you're the only one who uses mobile money, which I find quite interesting because it's also meeting a need of your specific audience.
Effectivement, il faut déjà observer le niveau de vie dans le pays dans lequel on évolue, c'est-à-dire quels sont les revenus moyens, quels sont les revenus mensuels que le citoyen de son pays gagne par mois. Et à partir de cela, on peut faire un petit calcul pour voir quel est l'abonnement de base qu'on peut présenter. Mais à notre niveau, on a eu différentes formules d'abonnement, c'est-à-dire on a un abonnement qui est encore plus accessible à une personne qui a un niveau de vie proche de la pauvreté, une pour la classe moyenne, une pour une population un peu plus aisée. Et on remarque d'ailleurs que ce sont ceux de la diaspora qui prennent les abonnements les plus élevés. Et les abonnements les plus bas, ils sont pris par ceux qui habitent dans le pays. Donc, il faut aussi expérimenter les modèles d'abonnement suivant des formules avec des prix qui sont pensés à partir du niveau de vie des citoyens. Ça, je pense que ce serait une intéressante perspective.
Thank you so much. And because I know that we're over time, I just want to do a quick wrap up of some of the things that I noted as just very important around, making sure that subscriptions, ensuring that subscriptions are not something that are considered to be a new thing of the digital age, making our audiences aware that subscription is not something new that's new in the media space as well, in the news media space, where we subscribe to Netflix. And what does that mean? That means there's a certain standard that is expected. And that for us, as news organizations, as product managers, that if we want the commitment that we've seen our audiences give to Netflix and other pay-for-TV services that we've seen within in media industries, that we need to make sure that we are also delivering a quality product. And I'm not quite sure who also said this, but it was just around that subscriptions are not just about this transactional payment and benefit relationship, but it's about really building our relationship with our audience. And I think one of the other threads that ran through all the presentations that there will be failures, but failures are lessons. And how do you use that information to make sure that the next product launch is better? And this is the thing about being the early innovators, is that there will be more at stake. There will be more times where you find yourself looking like you're failing more because you're trying something that no one else has tried. But I think as the revenue, the traditional revenue model for print and digital kind of dwindles, and we are really scratching around to find new ways. The innovators that were on this panel, from Yvette to Wale to Kobus and Ivo, as well as Musa, have really shown us that it is important for us to think out of the box and think about ways to serve our audiences in ways that matter to them. And with that, before I just wrap up, I'd just like any parting thoughts, just one or two sentences from each of our panelists. And Yvette, you're the first one on my screen on the side, so I'll start with you, and then we can go to Wale, Kobus, and Ivo, and then Musa as we wrap up.
Yeah, I mean, I was just thinking as you were speaking that I'm actually very grateful that the quality of conversation around subscriptions and memberships in Africa is really maturing, and we're beginning to hone in on quite specific problems that we need to fix as an ecosystem. So thanks to all the presenters for sharing their story. Yeah, it's great.
Thank you, Wale.
Thanks, Monsieur. Thanks everyone for really a very interesting conversation. It's been really, really insightful to learn from your different markets, from your different from the different audiences as well, what's working, and where you see opportunities. And it's also great to see that there are opportunities, and that we are actually looking at all these different challenges that we're facing as things that could potentially turn into opportunities. Like, I'm really excited to hear about subscription platforms being built. I'm really excited to hear about what's going on in just to even hear like the vibrancy of the space in Francophone Africa. For me, is just really exciting to hear how women are changing the narrative of farming in South Africa as well. It's just it just shows you such a dynamic and really diverse space as well. So it's a really, really exciting. It's been a very exciting conversation.
From our side, I think, Poncho, you said earlier, I definitely also experienced that there's almost a backlash against having to pay for content, but I also feel like it is that wall is breaking. People are realizing that quality content costs money, and I think that the tide is turning there. And I definitely think the membership and subscription model is opening up opportunities for online media, like, for instance, our training offering that we're working on, to come up with new ways of offering value and through content and through other services that we haven't seen before.
Musa, to wrap us up.
Alors moi, je pense que mes prédécesseurs ont tout dit, mais je vais surtout les encourager. On va s'encourager mutuellement à persévérer dans ce sens-là, parce que c'est une perspective très importante. C'est grâce au modèle d'abonnement qu'on pourra régler pas mal de problèmes, notamment la défiance vis-à-vis des médias. On pourra régler ce problème-là grâce à des modèles économiques qui sont beaucoup plus novateurs. Et j'encourage vraiment tout le monde à poursuivre sur cette voie. Voilà, bon courage à tous.
Thank you so much to our distinguished panel. That is Yvette Demiri, who is the product manager at Steers Business in Nigeria, Musa Ngom, who's the founder of La Maison de Reporter in Senegal, Kobus Lawrence and Ivo Price, who are the co-founders of Food for Mzansi here in South Africa, and Wale Lawal, who's the founder and editor-in-chief of The Republic in Nigeria. It's been such an interesting conversation. And as we wrap up, thank you so much for sharing your insights, your learnings, and all your experience with us. It has been a wonderful learning experience for myself as well. And as we wrap up, remember that at the top of the hour at 12 p.m. Central African Time, we move our discussion from Southern and West Africa to East Africa and learn a little bit more about media viability in that part of the continent. So please do join the continent. Please do join that panel where it discusses how media viability looks like in East Africa, as well as make sure that don't forget to join us a little later, also after 5 p.m. Central African time for the second evening of the exhibition hangout. Visit our websites for more. There are details on the slide on your screen right now. And that's it from my side, everyone. It's been such a pleasure moderating this interesting and fascinating conversation. And thank you to all our panelists for joining us and their insightful contributions. We will see you at the next session. Goodbye.
Singamakawe.
Sisi wenyewe ni mashujaa.
Nous sommes nos propres héros.
Tirimagamba Pachedu.
We are our own heroes.
Power to the innovators, the DIYers across the continent.
Power to you who push the doors wide open.
Power to you who've planted good seed on fertile African ground. We celebrate you. Thank you for joining us. Visit our websites and social media platforms to continue the conversation.